Are you ready to learn some more Ruby? Let's go! This video will be about Ruby arrays. We will learn how to access the elements in the array. We will learn how to manipulate those elements, that is, adding elements, removing elements from the array. And finally, we'll talk about how to iterate over all the elements of the array. So let's go. So first of all, arrays. Array is a data structure used to store some kind of collection of values all in one single entity. Let's go here. We already learned about variables. We can say, for example, set the age 48. But what if I had like many people in my application that I wanted to keep track of their age? For example, what would I do? I could say age of somebody and then age of and so on, but that's not really efficient, right? I don't want to have to type every single person's name and so on. So that's why we have data structures like arrays. So what we can do is we encapsulate these values, comma separated in a single entity, and we call it, put it like this, and that's an array. So arrays are between brackets, and they have values that are comma separated. In this case, this is an array of integers, but you could have any kind of arrays. You could have an array of words, 3 words here. This is an array of 3 elements. Each element is a string. So the size of this array is 3. One thing interesting about Ruby is that you don't necessarily have to have the array whose elements are all the same type. That is, we could just as well have this array with mixed kind of elements. I could have strings and integers or any other kind of elements in the array. So this will be perfectly fine in Ruby, though other languages might not be the case. For example, in C++, you have to declare the type of the elements in the array, and that has to follow the same type. Alright, so let's just jump into an example right away. I'm going to open up IRB and we're going to practice. So let me first define an array here. I'm going to just add some integers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is an array of 5 elements. Each element is an integer. Notice how they're comma separated, and we put brackets. Now Ruby is returning back an array, but I want some way of manipulating this array, so I'm going to store this array in a variable and I'm going to call it A, okay? You could have called it array or whatever you want. Now, to access elements in an array, I can use the bracket like so, and inside the brackets I put the index of the element. In this case, arrays are, you count the elements from 0, that is the offset. So for this element, which has the value 1, the location index would be 0 because we start counting from 0. So this location for this guy is 0, for 2 is 1, 2, 3, and 4. Alright, so let's test it out. If I say A bracket 0 or A sub 0, I should get the first element in the array, which is 1. And there it is. And so on, I can get all the other elements. The second element would be A sub 1, which is 2. And so on. Remember that the array has 5 elements, right? So if I want to get the last element, it's always going to be the array size minus 1. So if it is 5 elements, 5 minus 1, which is 4, that's the last element, which is going to be 5. This guy right here. Okay, so don't forget, arrays, you always start counting the index from 0. Now let's make another array of words, strings instead of numbers. Maybe you understand it better if they're not an array of integers. So I just defined an array of 4 elements, and each element is a string. Now, how can I get the first element of the array? That's right. I'm going to say the array name, I'm going to put brackets, and I'm going to put the index. Since the first element starts at 0, it has to be a sub 0. That's Bob. How can I get the last element? The array has 4 elements, therefore the last element has to be a 4 minus 1, which is 3. That's Janice. And you can get all the other guys in between. A sub 1 is Martin, a sub 2 is Anna. Alright. Now let's learn how to add elements to the array. That's going to be through the push operation. So, say I have 4 elements. I want to add another person's name to the array. I can use a.push, say Ian. Now Ruby returns back the array itself, but I can still check it again using a. And there it is, Ian has been pushed to the end of the array. And that's how you add elements. This case, push means adding an element to the end. If you want to remove the last element to the array, you can use the pop. So if I say a.pop, I should be able to get Ian back. So what happens is when you pop, it takes the last element, removes that from the array, and then returns that removed element to you so you can use it. In this case, I'm getting back Ian, but if I check A, it is no longer there because it has been removed. And I can keep popping until the array is empty. There goes Janice. There goes Anna. There goes Martin. And now only Bob, right? So I can pop it, and now there's nothing left in the array. And this is an empty array. When you see 2 brackets and nothing inside, that's called an empty array. You can also start off with an empty array if you're trying to build some sort of structure. For example, if I say array equals this is the literal notation for an empty array, and I can start pushing elements into that array. Let's say I push cake. Now my array has 1 element, and I can keep pushing new things. And I'm just pushing strings. Remember, it's also okay to push any other kind of data, because in Ruby it's okay to have an array of mixed data types. And I can just as well remove the elements using pop. So it is gone, and so on. Now I would like to talk about another way of manipulating the array, and that is adding an element to the beginning using shift and removing an element at the beginning of the array using shift, and then adding an element to the beginning using unshift. So say I have the array here. Let's add another element. Add soda back. And I don't know, something like that. Say instead of, I don't want to remove at the end, that would be pop, but I want to remove in the beginning, which is cake. How can I do that? I can use shift, array.shift. There I get cake back, but now it has been removed from the array. So shift removes an element from the beginning of the array. Now if I want to add an element to the beginning, I can use unshift. It's like the push, but at the beginning. Since push adds to the end, unshift will add to the beginning. So let's say array.unshift, and I give the what I want to add to the beginning. And there it is, carrot is now there at the beginning instead of the end. I can remove carrot with shift, and then I can remove another element from the beginning using shift. I can add an element to the beginning using unshift. There you go. Alright. So just a review. Let's recap. You can create an array using literal notation with an empty brackets, and you can start adding elements to it either using push or using unshift. If you use push, the element will be added to the end of the array. If you use unshift, the element will be added at the beginning. If you want to remove elements from the array, you can either pop, which will remove the last element, or you can shift, which will remove the first element of the array. You can access elements of the array using the brackets and give the index, always counting from 0. So sub-0 is the first element in the array, and to get the last element, it's always the array size minus 1. Say n is the size of some random array, and minus 1 would be the last element. For this case, array here has 3 elements, so the last element would be 3 minus 1, which is 2. And that's the third element and the last in the array. Okay, and in Ruby you can have an array of mixed types, so it's perfectly okay to have integers like this and strings and even floats and any other kind. It's totally fine. If I want to access the elements, say that is a sub 0, 1, 2, 3, 2.33 if 1 is low, and so on. Now let's move on to iterating through an array. So so far I've been able to interact with one element at a time, but what if I want to go through all the elements in the array? That's when you can have to use a loop, or you can use a Ruby iterator like each. So let's do it with each. So let's say I want to go through each element in the array A and just display its contents using a put s. So what I can do is I can say a dot each, and I have to pass a block with whatever I want to do with each element of the array. In this case, I'm going to do a put s, so I'm going to do a block here, and I'm going to put s the element. So what's happening here is the each iterator here is taking a block A block is denoted between braces if it's a single line, and for each iteration this block parameter here will hold the current element, and what I want to do with that element is just put as. So I'm put as each element of the array A. So first 1, 2, 3 is going to go into the element array in the element variable, and then I do put as element, and it's going to put as 1, 2, 3. The next iteration will be hello will be inside element, and then I can put as that element, which is hello, and so on. 2.3, it's mapped to element, and I can use it. 4.8, and then world. Okay, 1, 2, 3, hello, 2.33, 4.8, and world. So each was displayed in a new line because I used put as. Alright. This last line is just the return value of whatever this statement returned. In this case, it's returning A itself. So don't worry about that. Okay, so that's how you go through each element in the array. You don't have to necessarily just display it. You can do whatever you want. You can manipulate. You can like display the element with some pattern, like the current element is, I'm just concatenating that with the element, and it's going to display that message and whatever the value of the element is in this case. Yeah, the problem here is I have an array of mixed data types, so when it comes to element being an integer, it will not concatenate. So let's force element to be a string, and that should work. Okay, don't worry about that anyway. So that's what you could do. And let's put an array of integers here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's B. Let's iterate through each element. So B dot each. By the way, you can call this parameter anything you want. I'm just calling it element. Let's put as it. In this case, we already know what's going to happen. It's going to display 1 in its own line, then 2 in its own line, and so on. Right? Now, I could also say, for example, if I want to display each element but double, I could say put as element times 2. Keep in mind that doesn't really change the array itself, but the output is just the result of this expression. And you can multiply by 10 or whatever you want to do there. Alright. Now, iterate through an array, it's also possible using like loop constructs like a while, until, and so on. And in that case, you would have to access each array element using the brackets notation, and you would have to change the index every time like this. So let's do a quick demo of that. Let's go here. Say I have an array. Let's say cake. I have an array of 4 elements. They're all strings. And I don't want to use the each, I want to use a while loop. For example, what I could do is first I have to set an index variable, set it to 0, because I'm going to start in the first element. And then what I'm going to do is while index is less than a dot length or a dot size. It's up to you to choose. They're both the same. Wanna Forgot to mention that you can get the array size with saying dot length or dot size. That's the method that returns the array's length, number of elements in the array. Okay, I'm just gonna use a dot length. So as long as the index is less than the length of this array, what I'm gonna do, I'm just put as, but a at index. And don't forget to increment index here at the end of the loop before the end, otherwise you get an infinite loop. Okay, so initialize index to 0, and then the index is gonna keep increasing every time until you reach the array length, whereupon the loop will break, because the last element is always array length -1, so we don't want to go beyond that. And what I'm doing is I'm just displaying the element at the position index in the array A. In this case, index will first be 0, and then 1, and then 2, and so on. In this case, will be up to 4, because when this is increased to 4, it will break the loop here, and then you only get a sub 0 through a sub 3, which is the last element, because the size is 4, so 4 minus 1 is 3. Okay, let's test it out. I have a file called arrays.rb. I'm gonna go here, and I have it here. I'm gonna say Ruby and file name, and there you go. I have donut, cake, carrot, soda, all being displayed to the console. Now I could also display the elements in the reverse, starting from the last and going backwards, and I'll leave that as an exercise for you. So all you have to do is change the whatever index is being initialized to, and then the condition here, and then you have, instead of adding index, you have to subtract. Alright, so I think that's about it for this video. Just an introduction to Ruby arrays. We cover a lot of things. Just go on and practice. You can just use IRB, and then later on make your own file and put some stuff in there for things more complex, as using a loop construct or the each iterator. Now there are a lot more iterators that do a lot of interesting things with arrays, so once you get familiar with the basics, you can go on to these. Some of them are select, reject, and so on. Look at the Ruby documentation. Also map, really useful one. Thank you for watching my videos. If you liked, please subscribe. I really appreciate your watching, and any comments leave below, and see you next time.